In a world of words, imagine that you couldn't read a street sign, a prescription label, a bank statement, or a bedtime story to your child. That's the reality for 1 in 6 people in Center and Clearfield counties. For 35 years, the Mid-State Literacy Council has promoted adult and family literacy with volunteer tutors who conduct classes or work one-on-one with students in need of reading and writing skills. Call the Mid-State Literacy Council or visit our website to find out how you can give or receive the gift of literacy.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
I'd like to welcome you to the Boalsburg Heritage Museum. We're located in Boalsburg, Pennsylvania, the birthplace of Memorial Day. Our home here is that we're very proud of is a museum that has been built around a house that was built in 1825. It's a typical plank house, which was the next step up from the log cabin. Usually they were built with a center staircase and 2 large rooms on either side. The room that we're going into now was probably the family room where the family spent most of their time in the evenings, because this was where the large fireplace was and where the heat was. So this was the family room. We use it as a gallery. We have new exhibits replacing what's in here about every 2 months. And right now the exhibit that is in here has to do with Boalsburg's part in the Civil War. The listings are those of the men who joined the group that went off from Boalsburg shortly after President Lincoln asked for 75,000 men that he needed to begin in the Civil War. We have some individual letters that were written in the Civil War period, and we have a Bible that belonged to one of the generals who fought in the Civil War. That's a replica of the uniform that the men wore during the Civil War. That was the uniform that was created for the bicentennial when we celebrated in 1975, but it is not an original. The map is Center County, and the importance is that it was created in 1861, and we understand that we're not sure but we think that it's probably one of the oldest maps of the area, and it's a canvas backing with the different counties on it, and there were so few people living here in that period of time that they were able to put the names of where each individual family lived. The parlor was usually a room that was excluded from family living. This was where the best of the furniture was, and the children didn't play in here. You entertained your guests, and other than that, the room was generally closed. We've been very pleased with the fact that people have donated furniture from the period, and all of the pieces that we have throughout the house are things that were given by people who live here in Harris Township or their families. Some of the special pieces in here are the Thomas Edison phonograph, which was one of the very original ones that Thomas Edison invented. Another special piece is the lamp that hangs in the center of the room. It's circa 1820, and it was here in the house when we bought the house, so we're sure about that period. Another special piece is the piece in the corner It's called a fainting couch, and that ties in with the days when the ladies wore extremely tight-waisted dresses and generally could not breathe very well on a hot day, and so it was necessary to have a couch for them when they felt as though they needed to lie down. The next room is the dining room, and here again the furnishings are all very typical of the period. Oh, I want to mention the fact that the pictures that are on the wall, we had our own high school here in Boalsburg from the early 1900s to, from early 1900s to the 1940s, and we have been able to collect a picture of each of the graduating classes from 1916 to 1946, and we have them on the walls. The statuary on the sideboard was the original models that the sculptress made for us to advertise the fact that we wanted to create a memorial to the three ladies who were the beginning of Memorial Day. And the sculptor's name was Laura Jacobs, and we used this to explain to people why we were trying to collect the money, and we have now succeeded in doing that, and we have the three ladies just off 322 at the corner of 322 and Church Street. In this room, we tried to depict what it was like to go to a one-room schoolhouse. All of the pieces of furniture that are in this room have been brought from the one-room schoolhouses around the area. I believe there were about 7 or 8 of them scattered through the valley here for the Boalsburg people to use. And here again, we're very fortunate in that people donated these things when we found that we wanted to show this to the school tours, children who go through, and we like to talk about what it was like to go to a one-room schoolhouse. This collection was given to us by Ken and Margie Tennis, who were Boalsburg residents for many years. Ken grew up here as a child in the home of his uncle, who ran a general store. And years later, when he had grown, his uncle closed the store, and through the efforts of Ken and Margie, these things were all packed and saved. And so now we have all of the things that you would have seen or gone to buy in a general store back in probably in around the 1930s. Here we have 2 collections in this room. On the one side, we always, as we're giving tours for the young people, we remind them that in small villages such as Boalsburg, there were always 2 social things that the men were involved in. One was baseball, and the other one was their bands. And so here we have pictures of some of the bands that were in existence in the earlier days, and some of the instruments that were played by those band members. One of the other unique things was that in the 1930s it became very popular to have a banjo band. And most of the small towns around this area had their own banjo band. We have a picture of the one that was here in Boalsburg. We also have the banjo that belonged to one of the ladies who played. And this was also a step in the social graces in those days, because ladies were allowed to join the band in the 1930s. On this side, we have a little bit of the history of the sewing of the lady in the house. It wasn't until 1846 that Elias Howe invented the first sewing machine for the lady to use in her home. Before that, the sewing was all done by hand. There were industrial sewing machines that were used for sewing large quantities, but this was the first that the ladies had in her own home. In the other corner, we have an industrial sewing machine, and that ties in with the history of our carriage shop that we had here in Boalsburg, where they created carriages, wagons, and so on, and these machines were used to do the upholstery work. This is the master bedroom. The furnishings in this room were left in the house when we purchased it and had belonged to the lady who had lived in this house all her married life, and so it was just the way she had left it. We're particularly interested in the wallpapering because that was typical of what you would have found in the 1930s, the type of wallpaper that was used, and the narrow border around the top, which has since gone out of style. And the fact that the ceilings were wallpapered because the plaster was too rough and irregular to be painted. This room is a collection of items that are just something interesting to the period. The most interesting, I think, is the rope bed. I have spoken to people who have slept in them, and they say that it's a picnic, not a picnic. The other things in the room that we have are the lady is dressed in the typical garments that would have been used in the horse and buggy days, very heavy wool cloak, cape, and her dark clothes would suggest that she might be in mourning. The little boy in his uniform is tied in with some of the other history in our town, in that this is the uniform that was worn by the children who went to, the boys who went to the Boys Academy we had here in Boalsburg. And the part that ties that into the history is that the man who was the headmaster, when the Civil War came along, he decided that he was going to leave and join the service, and he and his older teenage boys left town, and the academy collapsed. We have just come into our summer kitchen that we have here at the museum, and the reason that generally these houses had a summer kitchen that was twofold. It was first to keep the heat out of the house in the summertime, and the second reason was that if there was a fire, it meant you didn't lose the whole house when the summer kitchen burned. But the lady of the house did a great many chores out here, especially the things that were kind of dirty. She wanted to keep those out of the house. And the important thing that we have here in our summer kitchen is the beehive oven. And there are very few of them that are left, and ours has been totally restored. The way the beehive oven works is that the back of it is in a honeycomb kind of shape. The flat surface inside the square box here is covered with brick, and then there is a dome of brick over the top. The idea was that the lady of the house would come out in the evening, and she would fill the surface of that brick with the kindling, and she would start that on fire, and it would burn through the night. The next morning she would come out and scrape out all of the ashes, and in the meantime The brick that was laying over the top would have absorbed all the heat so that she had a nice even heat to put her bread in to bake. And the story is told that the lady could stick her arm into the oven, and according to how far her hand or her arm went in, she knew what the temperature was, and she knew whether it was ready for her bread or not. She also used the fireplace for her cooking. You can see by the kettles that were there and the hardware that was necessary how she cooked things over the fireplace. She also used it for the place that she did her washing, because here she could heat her water, and here she had her washing facilities. No washer and dryer in the summer kitchen. It was all by hand. She also did canning out here. She also did her, when they had done their butchering, the back end behind the beehive oven was the summer kitchen, not the summer kitchen, the smokehouse. And by taking a portion off the back of the beehive oven, you could put the fire in here and the smoke would go out, and that was where she could smoke her bacon and her hams. So this was really a utility area for the lady of the house.